Hello, and I am reading Things Fall Apart at around 10:14 p.m. Things Fall Apart. I'm going to do part 1 today, which is 13 chapters, so expect to be here for some time. I'm also doing packets as well. I already got some down, that's because of schoolwork and all that. However, I will also be doing that here too, so it's going to be taking even longer. And hey, you gotta do whatever you can to get through school, am I right? Let's begin. Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Emmeline's the cat. Emmeline's was the great wrestler who for 7 years was unbeaten. From Umofia to Mabino, he was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight, which the old men agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. The drums beat and the flutes sang, and the spectators held their breath. Emmeline's was a wily craftsman, but Okonkwo was as slippery as a fish in water. Every nerve and every muscle stood out on their arms, on their backs, and their thighs, and one almost heard them stretching to breaking point. In the end, Okonkwo threw the cat. That was many years ago, 20 years or more, and during this time Okonkwo's fame had grown like a bushfire in the Harmattan. He was tall and huge, and his bushy eyebrows and wide nose gave him a very severe look. He breathed heavily, and it was said that when he slept, his wives and children in their houses could hear him breathe. When he walked, his heels hardly touched the ground. He seemed to be walking on springs, as if he was going to pounce on somebody. He did pounce on people quite often. He had a slight stammer. Whenever he was angry, he could not get his words out quickly enough. He would use his fists. He had no patience with unsuccessful men. He had no patience with his father. Unoka, for that was his father's name, had died 10 years ago. In his day, he was lazy and improvident, and was quite incapable of thinking about tomorrow. If any money came his way, and it seldom did, he immediately bought gourds of palm wine, called round his neighbors, and made merry. He always said that whenever he saw a dead man's mouth, he saw the folly of not eating what one had in one's lifetime. Unoka was, of course, a debtor, and he owed every neighbor some money, from a few cowries to quite substantial amounts. He was tall but very thin and had a slight stoop. He wore a haggard and mournful look except when he was drinking or playing on his flute. He was very good on his flute, and his happiest moments were the 2 or 3 moons after the harvest, when the village musicians brought down their instruments, hung above the fireplace. Unoka would play with them, his face beaming with blessedness and peace. Sometimes another village would ask Unoka's band and their dancing egugu to come and stay with them and teach them their tunes. They would go to such hosts for as long as 3 or 4 markets, making music and feasting. Unoka loved the good fare and the good fellowship, and he loved this season of the year, when the rains had stopped and the sun rose every morning with dazzling beauty, and it was not too hot either, because the cold and dry Harmattan wind was blowing down from the north. Some years the Harmattan was very severe, and a dense haze hung on the atmosphere. Old men and children would then sit round log fires, warming their bodies. Unoka loved it all, and he loved the first kites that returned to the dry season, and the children who sang songs of welcome to them. He would remember his own childhood, how he had often wandered around looking for a kite sailing leisurely against the blue sky. As soon as he found one, he would sing with his whole being, welcome it back from its long, long journey, asking if it had brought home any lengths of cloth. That was years ago, when he was young. Unoka, the grown-up, was a failure. He was poor, and his wife and children had barely enough to eat. People laughed at him because he was a loafer, and they swore never to lend him any more money because he never paid back. But Unoka was such a man that he always succeeded in borrowing more and piling up his debts. One day, a neighbor called Okoye came in to see him. He was reclining on a mud bed in his hut, playing on a flute. He immediately rose and shook hands with Okoye, who then unrolled the goatskin which he carried underneath his arms and sat down. Unoka went into an inner room and soon returned with a small wooden disc containing a cola nut, some alligator pepper, and a lump of white chalk. "I have cola," he announced when he sat down, and passed the disc over to his friend. "Thank you. He who brings cola brings life, but I think you ought to break it," replied Okoye, passing back the disc. "No, it is for you, I think." And they argued like this for a few moments before Unoka accepted the honor of breaking the cola. Okoye, meanwhile, took the lump of chalk, drew some lines on the floor, and then painted his big toe. As he broke the cola, Unoka prayed to their ancestors for life and health, and for protection against their enemies. When they had eaten, they talked about many things, about the heavy rains which were drowning the yams, about the next ancestral feast, and about the impending war with the village of Mbaino. Unoka was never happy when it came to wars. He was in fact a coward and could not bear the sight of blood, and so he changed the subject and talked about music. And his face beamed. He could hear in his mind's ear the blood-stirring and intricate rhythms of the ekwe and the udu and the ojin, and he could hear his own flute weaving in and out of them, decorating them with a colorful and plaintive tune. The total effect was gay and brisk, but if one picked out their flute as it went up and down and then broke up into short snatches, one saw that there was sorrow and grief there. Alright, time to do some questions. What is the rhetorical effect used in the following line? The drums beat and the flutes sang and the spectators held their breath. What effect does it create? Let's go back. Drums beat and flutes sang and spectators held their breath. This, by the way, I don't know if I'm right or not. I'm doing this for high school, so hey, I tried. This creates a sense of suspense as we don't know if Okonkwo will throw the cat. Alright, next question. Describe Okonkwo. What does Asheb use animal imagery to describe him? Mark a note in my book. Let's go back. Well, I know the next question. To 7. Describe Unoka. How does Okonkwo feel about his father? Unoka is a negligent and drunkard father, where, as described, he often spends any money he gets. He gets any money he gets on palm wine and occurs great debt. Now, for number 6, describe Okonkwo. Why does Asheb use animal imagery to describe him? I don't know who that is yet. Asheb? I'm assuming it's a she uses animal imagery to dictate Okonkwo's traits as he through another animal like being. Okonkwo can be described as tall, wide nose, and is in action to pounce at any moment, much like a panther. Those sentences should be swapped, I know, but you gotta do with what you got. All right. Why does Asheb spend so much of her time? Oh, okay, that's after. Okay. All right, back to reading. Okoye was also a musician. He played on the ogen, but he was not a failure like Unoka. He had a large barn full of yams, and he had 3 wives. And now he was going to take the Idamili title, the 3rd highest in the land. It was a very expensive ceremony, and he was gathering all his resources together. That was, in fact, the reason why he had come to see Unoka. He cleared his throat and began, "Thank you for the kola. You may have heard of the title I intend to take shortly." Having spoken plainly so far, Okoye said the next half a dozen sentences in Proverbs. Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. Okoye was a great talker. He spoke for a long time, skirting around the subject and then hitting it finally. In short, he was asking Unoka to return the 200 cowries he had borrowed from him more than 2 years ago. As soon as Unoka understood what his friend was driving at, he burst out laughing. He laughed loud and long, his voice rang out clear as the ogen, and tears stood in his eyes. His visitor was amazed and sat speechless. At the end, Unoka was able to give an answer between fresh outbursts of mirth. Is there? Oh, apparently. Alright, I guess, we'll do number 10. The importance of... Here, let me read the question first. Explain the importance of the following line. Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. Explain the importance of this line. The importance to this line is that banter is one of, we'll go back to that one. Having spoken plainly so far, Okoye said the next half dozen sentences in Proverbs. Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. Okoye was a great talker, and he spoke for a long time, sitting on the subject and then hitting it finally. Importance to this line is that banter is one of is that they're talking and diplomatic
skills are very high, which is why Okoye skirts around, then finally answers the question. In essence, he is finding a perfect time to say the right thing at the right time. I can barely read my own handwriting. In essence, he is finding a perfect... Oh, I guess... No, that doesn't make any sense. To this line is that this is a bit of a doozy. Go back and read this. Resources together, the fact that he wanted to come to see Unoka, he cleared his throat and began. Thank you for the cola. You may have heard of the title. Oh. That because because conversation is taken very seriously, this implies that what you say means you will or have done it. Like when Okoye lent Unoka his stock, and Unoka said he would pay it back. Hence, taken seriously, he expected so. There we go. I like that. I've looked for the other two questions. It doesn't say anything about how Okonkwo viewed his father yet. It also says he had 3 wives. Never mind. He just had one more. I guess back to it then. Look at the wall, he said, pointing at the far wall of his hut, which was rubbed with red earth so that it shone. Look at those lines of chalk. And Okoye saw groups of short, perpendicular lines drawn in chalk. There were 5 groups, and the smallest group had 10 lines. Unoka had a sense of the dramatic, and so he allowed a pause, in which he took a pinch of snuff and sneezed noisily. Then he continued, "Each group there represents a debt to someone, and each stroke is 100 calories. You see, I owe that man 1,000 calories, but he has not come to wake me up in the morning for it. I shall pay you, but not today. Our elders say that the sun will shine on those who stand before it, shines on those who kneel under them. I shall pay my big debts first." And he took another pinch of snuff, as if that was paying the big debts first. Okoye rolled his goatskin and departed. When Unoka died, he had taken no title at all, and he was heavily in debt. Any wonder, then, that his son Okonkwo was ashamed of him? Alright, that's a question. We learn that Okonkwo is ashamed of him. His father's reputation. Fortunately, among these people, a man was judged according to his worth and not according to the worth of his father. That's good, I respect that. Okonkwo was clearly cut out for great things. He was still young, but he had won fame as the greatest wrestler in the 9 villages. He was a wealthy farmer and had 2 barns full of yams and had just married his 3rd wife. Okonkwo was married to 3 wives, okay. To crown it all, he had taken 2 titles and had shown incredible prowess in 2 intertribal wars. And so, although Okonkwo was still young, he was already one of the greatest men of his time. Age was respected among his people, but achievement was revered. As the elders said, if a child washed his hands, he could eat with kings. Okonkwo had clearly washed his hands, and so he ate with kings and elders. And that was how he came to look after the doomed lad, who was sacrificed to the village of Umofia by the neighbors to avoid war and bloodshed. The ill-fated lad was called Ikemefuna. How does the text refer to Ikemefuna? The text refers to him, parenthesis, at least in chapter 1. That he is the child sacrificed to prevent war. Basically, not much detail. What do these references indicate about Ikemefuna? The references indicate that Ikemefuna is going to be sacrificed in order to prevent a war. explain the purposes of the first chapter. This chapter provides back story to parenthesis what I'm assuming to the main character and also foreshadows future events. Back to... By the way, that was the end of chapter 1. Why does Esheb spend so much of the first part of the chapter describing Unoka? I can only guess, but... Well, let me go back. Esheb goes into detail to explain the motivation for Okonkwo to achieve much more than he ever was if he was only a simple yam farmer. How does Okonkwo's impression of his father shape Okonkwo's character? Okonkwo views his father as what did you describe it as? What is it? It's like I think it's like a mute or something like that. Lazy, improvident, and a debtor. His father as a lazy, improvident debtor. Much of the contrary to Okonkwo, as he is active, famous, and has more yams to fill a shed. Rich. In parentheses. There we go. Chapter 1 questions are done. Chapter 2. Here we go. The villagers communicate with each other. Alright, we'll find that out next. Okonkwo had just... Oh, by the way, this is chapter 2. Okonkwo had just blown out the palm oil lamp and stretched himself on his bamboo bed when he heard the ogan of the town crier piercing the still night air. Gome, 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 or gome, 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 gome. Boomed the hollow metal. Then the crier gave his message. At the end of it, beat his instrument again. And this was the message. Every man of Umothia was asked to gather at the marketplace tomorrow morning. Okonkwo wondered what was amiss, for he knew certainly that something was amiss. He had discerned a clear overtone of tragedy in the crier's voice, and even now he could still hear it as it grew dimmer and dimmer in the distance. The night was very quiet. It was always quiet, except on moonlight nights. Darkness held a vague terror for those people even the bravest among them. Children were warned not to whistle at night for fear of evil spirits. Dangerous animals became even more sinister and uncanny in the dark. A snake was never called by its name at night because it would hear. It was called a string, and so on this particular night, as the crier's voice was gradually swallowed up in the distance, silence returned to the world. A vibrant silence made more intense by the universal trill of a million forest insects. On a moonlight night, it would be different. On a moonlit night, it would be different. The happy voices of children playing in open fields would then be heard, and perhaps those not so young would be playing in pairs in less open places. And old men and women would remember their youths, as the Igbo say, when the moon is shining, the crippled becomes hungry for a walk. Oh my god. What? Oh, okay, I see. Alright. Mark that right there. How do the villagers communicate with each other? Well, inferencing, they use an ogene. The villages use an ogene to communicate. With the italicized words, onomano, I don't know how to spell it, pios, or the sounds that the ogene makes. This provides us with auditory experience towards the ogene sounds and communication. What does Okonkwo realize after the town crier comes through the town? That something is amiss, and it will be told. It will be told in the marketplace. Morning come. Give me a second, I'll be right back. I'm back. I just had to finish up some
other stuff. Alright. Next question. How do people feel about night? How do they eliminate or deal with fear? The people are afraid per se. The darkness rather than night itself. They deal with it by not saying the cursed animals that could snatch or hurt them if they say their name. So instead, they use code names to deal with it. So the meaning of what this, when the moon is shining, the cripple becomes hungry for a walk. This means that since only about 2 or 3 full moons, they want to see how it is at night time. Because they are usually inside and afraid of the darkness. How does Okonkwo feel about war? What do you think he feels this way? Alright. Back to where he left off, which is the quote that was instead. Here, I'll reread the last sentence. As the Igbo say, when the moon is shining, the cripple becomes hungry for a walk. But this particular night was dark and silent, and in all the 9 villages of Umofia, the town crier with his ogene asked every man to be present tomorrow morning. Okonkwo, on his bamboo bed, tried to figure out the nature of the emergency. War with a neighboring clan? That seemed the most likely reason. He was not afraid of war. He is a man of action, a man of war. Unlike his father, he could stand the look of blood. In Umofia's latest war, he was the first to bring home a human head. Ugh. That was his 5th head. And he was not an old man yet. On great occasions, such as the funeral of a village celebrity, he drank his palm wine from his first human head. That's disgusting. That does give us the answer to the question. Okonkwo describes himself as a man of war and is more than ready to go. He feels this way to branch from his father. As he can stand the sight of blood.
Explain the purpose of the following line as it relates to characterization. On great occasions, such as the funeral of a village celebrity, he drank his palm wine from his first human head. To show his honor and fame that he brought from the tides of war. Back to where we were. In the morning, the marketplace was full. There must have been about 10,000 men there. Ooh, that's a lot. All talking in low voices. At last, Ogbufi Ezego stood up in the midst of them and bellowed 4 times, Umofia Kwenu, Umofia Kwenu, Umofia Kwenu, Umofia Kwenu. And on each occasion, he faced a different direction and seemed to push the air with a clenched fist. And 10,000 men answered, Yah, each time. Then there was perfect silence. Ugbufi Ezugo was a powerful orator and was always chosen to speak on such occasions. Oh, that ties into the power of conversation. I'm gonna write that down. Ties into the art of conversation. He moved his hand over his white head and stroked his white beard. He then adjusted his cloth, which was passed under his right armpit and tied above his left shoulder. Umofia Quinu, he bellowed a 5th time, and the crowd yelled an answer. And then suddenly, like one possessed, he shot out his left hand and pointed in the direction of Mbino, and said through gleaming white teeth firmly clenched, Those sons of wild animals have dared to murder a daughter of Umofia. Oof. He threw his head down and gnashed his teeth and allowed a murmur of suppressed anger to sweep the crowd. And he began again. The anger on his face was gone, and in its place a sort of smile hovered, more terrible and more sinister than that anger. And in a clear, unemotional voice, he told Umofia how their daughter had gone to market at Mbino and had been killed. That woman, said Izugo, was the wife of Ugbufi Udo. He pointed to a man who sat near him with a bowed head. The crowd then shuddered with anger and thirst for blood. Many others spoke, and at the end it was decided to follow the normal course of action. An ultimatum was immediately dispatched to Mbino, asking them to choose between war on the one hand and the other offer of a young man and a virgin as compensation. Umofia was feared by all its neighbors. It was powerful in war and in magic, and its priests and medicine men were feared in all the surrounding country. Its most potent war medicine was as old as the clan itself. Nobody knew how old. But on one point there was general agreement. The active principle in that medicine had been an old woman with one leg. In fact, the medicine itself was called Agadi Nweye, or Old Woman. It had its shrine in the center of Umofia, in a cleared spot, and if anybody was so foolhardily as to pass by the shrine after dusk, he was sure to see the old woman hopping about. Alright, this is a lot of information. How did the other tribes feel about Umofia? Number 9. They feel attacked as apparently one of no. How do other tribes feel about Umofia? Other tribes fear Umofia because of the copious soldiers, medicine, and I don't like that. I'm gonna erase that.
The tribes fear Umofia
because oops, what the heck? What the heck happened? Oh, there it is. It's powerful in magic.
fear Umofia because it is enlightened by its power and magic. Not only that, but its secret medicine. Describe the nature of the conflicts between the villages in Bino and Mofia. Describe the conflicts. Let's see. Oh my god, it's level 2. Oof, this is not gonna be fun. The woman said Izugo had by now known as the conflicts are an ultimatum against Umofia and Bino. How does Umofia choose to settle the dispute? Umofia settles the dispute by giving it two options. One is oh, there's more that I need to read out. Never mind. Alright, so it has shared the sign everybody foolhardily expressed. And so the neighboring clans who naturally knew of these things feared Umofia and would not go to war against it without first trying a peace settlement. And in fairness to Umofia, it should be recorded that it never went to war unless its case was clear and just and was accepted as such by its oracle, the oracle of the hills and the caves. And there were indeed, when the oracle had forbidden Umofia to wage a war, the clan had disobeyed the oracle, they would surely have been beaten, because their dreaded Agadi Nwei would never fight what the Igbo call a fight of blame. So dispute. One is to sacrifice a virgin and one man or war. But after the oracle of the hills and caves. Caves, what page is that? I need to write evidence, that's why. Page 12, paragraph 1. This indicates that the Igbo tribe uses voodoo and or magical entities and oracles through the use of divinity. Hence why medicine is made of a one-legged lady, as it is deemed divine. Why is Okonkwo chosen to visit Mbino? I can inference that one probably, but let me read it. But the war that now threatened was a just war. Even the enemy clan knew that, and so when Okonkwo of Imofia arrived at Mbino as the proud and imperious emissary of war, he was treated with great honor and respect, and 2 days later he returned home with a lad of 15 and a young virgin. The lad's name was Ikemefuna, whose sad story is still told in Imofia unto this day. The elders or Ndichi met to hear a report of Okonkwo's mission. At the end they decided, as everybody knew they would, the girl should go to Ogbufi Udo to replace his murdered wife. As for the boy, he belonged to the clan as a whole, and there was no hurry to decide his fate. Okonkwo was, therefore, asked on behalf of the clan to look after him in the interim. And so for 3 years, Ikemefuna lived in Okonkwo's household. Oh, that's nice. I'm assuming because actually I should write Okonkwo was chosen because of his fame. As PQR, Okonkwo was chosen because of his fame in combat and knew that Mbino would agree to Umufia, oops, that's not an I, it's a U. Umufia's demands. Hence, art of conversation. These authors really good in tying things back together. Why does the reader because the author leaves us the detail that Mufuna's tale is still told today.
Alright, I think it's as far as we're at, though. Family? Yep, there we go. So, page 13. Okonkwo ruled his household with a heavy hand. His wives, especially the youngest, lived in perpetual fear of his fiery temper, and so did his little children. Perhaps down in his heart, Okonkwo was not a cruel man, but his whole life was dominated by fear, the fear of failure and of weaknesses. It was deeper and more intimate than the fear of evil and capricious gods and of magic. The fear of the forest and of the forces of nature, malevolent, red in tooth and claw. Okonkwo's fear was greater than these. It was not external, but lay deep within himself. It was the fear of himself, lest he should be found to resemble his father. Even as a little boy, he had resented his father's failure and weaknesses, and even now he still remembered how he had suffered when a playmate had told him that his father was Agbala. That was how Okonkwo first came to know that Agbala was not only another name for a woman, it could also mean a man who had taken no title. And so Okonkwo was ruled by one passion, to hate everything that his father, Unoka, had loved. One of those things was gentleness, and another was idleness. I like this dude. How describe the family structure of Okonkwo's tribe? I'd say it's patrilineal. The family is run by the man or patrilineal, as he is described to rule by a heavy hand. It would be deemed harsh and consequential to a youth's mind, and would be looked down upon. Why does Okonkwo treat his family the way he does? Okonkwo treats his family as such to not resemble his father, and has set out to eliminate such beliefs. Asheb makes us relate to the human flaws, I should say, not characteristics, to the human flaws, and creates a sense of connection. At least in my opinion. It was deeper and more intimate than the feel of capricious. What rhetorical techniques does Asheb use in the following lines? It was deeper and more intimate than the fear of evil and capricious gods and magic. The fear of the forest. Oh, what is that? Is it alliteration? Alliteration, as there is a repeat of the same words dash consonants in many places. of said text. I should have informed the reader that there is a word that means both woman and a man who has taken a title. That this describes the man with no title is equivalent to a wife slash, well, no, I shouldn't say wife, because they are useful. I'm saying I'm gonna get flamed for this, but regardless, is equivalent. No title is equivalent. That man with no title is equivalent to a woman I'm putting that in parentheses again. Patrilineal, not equal. So please don't flame me. I'm gonna get flamed regardless. Nevertheless, let's pursue on. During the planting season, Okonkwo worked daily on his farms from cockcrow until the chickens went to roost. He was a very strong man and rarely felt fatigue, but his wives and young children were not as strong, and so they suffered. But they dared not complain openly. Okonkwo's first son, Noye, was then 12 years old, and was already causing his father great anxiety for his incipient laziness. At any rate, give me a second, let me write something down. Incipient laziness. At any rate, that was how it looked to his father, and he sought to correct him by constant nagging and beating. That was a swap. And so Noye was developed into a sad-faced youth. Okonkwo's prosperity was visible in his household. He had a large compound enclosed by a thick wall of red earth. His own hut, or obi, stood immediately behind the only gate in the red walls. Each of his 3 wives had her own hut, which together formed a half-moon, that's cute, behind the obi. The barn was built against one end of the red walls, and long stacks of yams stood out prosperously in it. At the opposite end of the compound was a shed for the goats, and each wife built a small attachment to her hut for the hens. Near the barn was a small house, the medicine house, or shrine, where Okonkwo kept the wooden symbols of his personal god and of his ancestral spirits. He worshipped them with sacrifices of kola nut, food, and palm wine, and offered prayers to them on behalf of himself, his 3 wives, and 8 children. Whew! 8 kids. Damn, Mom Taramba. Who is Noye? Noye is Okonkwo's eldest son. Okonkwo felt he wasn't doing enough and nagged at him to be more. There's a function of Noye. No, because many others can dictate their own views, but Noye was trying to, but incidentally, no. Noye was trying to not complain. Oops. But Noye was trying to not complain, but that didn't hide it from Okonkwo. Read the exchange between Okonkwo and his most senior wife. Oops. So the daughter of Imofia was killed in Bino, Ikemefuna came into Okonkwo's household. When Okonkwo brought him home that day, he called his most senior wife and handed him over to her. He belongs to the clan, he told her, so look after him. Is he staying long with us? She asked. Do what you are told, woman. Oof. Wow. Do what you're told, woman. Okonkwo thundered and stammered. When did you become one of the Ndichi of Mumofia? And so Noye's mother took Ikemefuna to her hut and asked no more questions. Whew. Ouch. Did not sound fun. Okonkwo treated her as you'd treat someone slower than you. Impatient and hurry it up. This shows the definitive patriarchy in the Igbo tribe. Not tribe. Describe the compound where Okonkwo and his family live. Why does this tell the reader about Okonkwo? That although he isn't too religious, the moon and such still have a big impact on them. Oh shoot, sorry. Chapter 3. I'm not done with chapter 2 yet, so give me a second. That's just the questions. Oh god. As for the boy himself, he was terribly afraid. He could not understand what was happening to him or what he had done. How could he know that his father had taken a hand in killing a daughter of Imofia? All he knew was that a few men had arrived at their house, conversing with his father in low tones. At the end he had been taken out and handed over to a stranger. His mother had wept bitterly, but he had been too surprised to weep, and so the stranger had brought him and a girl a long, long way from home, through lonely forest paths. He did not know who the girl was, and he never saw her again. Oof. Dear God, 10 more chapters to go. Oh. Woo, and it is 11:25. Okonkwo did not have the start. Chapter 3. Okonkwo did not have the start in life which many young men usually had. He did not inherit a barn from his father. There was no barn to inherit. The story was told in Imofia of his father, Unoka,
had gone to consult the oracle of the hills of the caves to find out why he always had a miserable harvest. The oracle was called Agbala. People came from far and near to consult it. They came when misfortune dogged their steps, or when they had a dispute with their neighbors. They came to discover what the future held for them, or to consult the spirits of their departed fathers. The way into the shrine was a round hole at the side of a hill, just a little bigger than the round opening into a henhouse. Worshippers and those who came to seek knowledge from the god crawled on their belly through the hole and found themselves in a dark, endless space in the presence of Agbala. No one had ever beheld Agbala except his priestess, but no one had ever crawled into his awful shrine, had come out without the fear of his power. His priestess stood by the sacred fire which she built in the heart of the cave and proclaimed the will of the god. The fire did not burn with a flame. The glowing logs only served to light up vaguely the dark figure of the priestess. That was a lot of information. What effect does Ashed achieve with his repetition of the phrase, they came, in the second paragraph? The oracle was called Agbala, and people came from far and near to consult it. They came when misfortune dogged their steps, and when they had disputed their neighbors, they came to this food. The effect shows us that there were many reasons to see the oracle. People crawl when visiting Agbala. I don't know. Let me read that again. Unless they crawl. The way into the shrine was a round hole at the side of the hill, which is a little bigger than a round opening into a henhouse. Oh, because the entrance is small. Because the entrance is small and have to crawl on their stomachs. It might be unusual because of it might be unusual that a woman is the one who serves and can see Agbala. Because of the strong patriarchal definitive over their land. Sometimes a man came to consult the spirit of his dead father or relative. It was said that when such a spirit appeared, the man saw it vaguely in the darkness but never heard its voice. Some people even said that they had heard the spirits flying and flapping their wings against the roof of the cave. Many years ago, when Okonkwo was still a boy, his father, Unoka, had gone to consult Agbala. The priestess in those days was a woman called Chika. She was full of the power of her god, and she was greatly feared. Unoka stood before her and began his story. Every year, he said sadly, before I put any crop in this earth, I sacrifice a cock to Ani, the owner of all land. It is the law of our fathers. I also kill a cock at the shrine of Ifejioku, the god of yams. I clear the bush and set fire to it when it is dry. I sow the yams when the first rain has fallen, and stake them when the young tendrils appear. I read, hold your peace, screamed the priestess, her voice terrible as it echoed through the dark void. You have offended neither the gods nor your fathers. When a man is at peace with his gods and his ancestors, his harvest will be good or bad according to the strength of his arm. You, Unoka, are known in all the clan for the weakness of your machete and your hoe. When your neighbors go out with their axe to cut down virgin forests, you sow your yams on exhausted farms that take no labor to clear. They crossed 7 rivers to make their farms. You stay at home and offer sacrifices to a reluctant soil. Go home and work like a man. Shit. Or shoot, sorry. School appropriate. That he learns that the soil in which he is cultivating isn't fit and is reluctant to give to Unoka. What is a chi? How? I don't know. Ever Forest? Unoka was an ill-fated man. He had a bad chi, or personal god. Oh. And evil fortune followed him to the grave, or rather to his death, for he had no grave. He died of the swelling, which was an abomination to the earth goddess. When a man was afflicted with swelling in his stomach and the limbs, he was not allowed to die in the house. He was carried to the evil forest and left there to die. There was the story of a very stubborn man who staggered back to his house and had to be carried again to the forest and tied to a tree. The sickness was an abomination to the earth, and so the victim could not be buried in her bowels. He died and rotted away above the earth, and was not given the first or the second burial. Such was Unoka's fate. When they carried him away, he took with him his flute. For the father like Unoka, Okonkwo did not have the start in life which many young men had. He neither inherited a barn nor a title, not even a young wife. But in spite of these disadvantages, he had begun even in his father's lifetime to lay the foundation of a prosperous future. It was slow and painful, but he threw himself into it like one possessed. And indeed, he was possessed by the fear of his father's contemptible life and shameful death. It's basically your karma, and the more you put in, the better outcome. It's important because this shows who you truly are and what you deserve. Why is Unoka? Because he was afflicted with swelling. Unoka is left because he is afflicted with the swelling. Read the first part of the chapter and last before the break. What is a shame? Okonkwo did not have the start in life which many young men usually have. He did not inherit a barn from his father. There was no barn to inherit. The story was told in Umofia of how his father Unoka had gone to consult on the company to find out why he always had a miserable harvest. Now it says, with a father like Unoka, Okonkwo did not have the start in life with many years. He neither inherited a barn nor a title, nor even a young wife. But in spite of these disadvantages, he had begun, even in his father's lifetime, to lay the foundations of a prosperous future. It was slow and painful, but he threw himself into it like one possessed. And indeed, he was possessed by the fear of his father's contemptible life and shame. He is repeating the fact about titles, land, and barns.
he does this to show the contrast in character between Okonkwo and Unoka? Oh, right, okay. Unoka. What is Nwakibi? How does the reader know that he is successful?
There was a wealthy man in Okonkwo's village who had 3 huge barns, 9 wives, and 30 children. Good God. His name was Makibi, and he had taken the highest but one title which a man could take in the clan. It was for this man that Okonkwo worked to earn his first seed yams. Is there a question on there?
Who is not? Nwakibi is a rich and powerful man. We know this due to house size, wives, and children number. Oh my God.
He took a pot of palm wine and cocked to Nwakibi. 2 elderly neighbors were sent for, and Nwakibi's 2 grown-up sons were also present in his obi. He presented a kola nut and an alligator pepper, which were passed around for all to see and then returned to him. He broke the nut, saying, "We shall all live. We pray for life, children, a good harvest, and happiness. You will have what is good for you. I will have what is good for me. Let the kite perch, and let the eagle perch too. If one says no to the other, let his wing break." After the kola nut had been eaten, Okonkwo brought his palm wine from the corner of the hut where it had been placed and stood it in the center of the group. He addressed Nwakibi, calling him "Our Father." "Not I," he said. "I have brought you this little kola. As our people say, a man who pays respect to the great paves. As our people say, a man who pays respect to the great paves the way for his own greatness. A man who pays respect to the great paves the way for his own greatness. I have come to pay you my respect and also to ask a favor. Let us drink the wine first."
God, I'm tired. I have like 3 more fucking chapters.
Just kidding. I got 13. This one isn't as long, to be honest. That's not that long. Fuck it, I'll do it all tonight. Oh, chapter 7. That's hot. 15 freaking questions. I'm not even done with chapter 3. Why did I have to push this off till now? It's like some stupid. No, I'm just kidding. I'm in all honors classes. Let's push forward. What is Nokisi? You will have what is good for you, and I will have what is good for me. Catch for this one says no, I was like. Nwakibi means that everyone wishes each other good nest, but if spite, have it be returned to the spiteful. I guess. What is the meaning of the following? An old woman is always uneasy when dry bones are mentioned in a proverb. I have no idea. Oh my god.
Everyone thanked Okonkwo and the babies brought out their goatskin bags they carried. Makibi brought down his own horn, which was fastened to the rafters. The younger of his sons, who was also the youngest man in the group, moved to the center, raised the pot on his left knee, and began to pour out the wine. The first cup went to Okonkwo, who must taste his wine before anyone else. And the group drank, beginning with the eldest man. When everyone had drunk 2 or 3 horns, God, that's a lot, Makibi sent for his wives. Some of them were not at home, and only 4 came in. "Is Anasi not in?" he asked them. They said she was coming. Anasi was the first wife, and others could not drink before her, and so they stood waiting. Nasi was a middle-aged woman, tall and strongly built. There was authority in her bearing, and she looked every inch the ruler of the womenfolk in a large and prosperous family. She wore the anklet of her husband's titles, which the first wife alone could wear. She walked up to her husband and accepted the horn from him. She then went down on one knee, drank a little, and handed back the horn. She rose, called by his name, and went back to her hut. Other wives drank in the same way, in the proper order, and went away. What does meaning an old woman is uneasy when dry bones? No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I read too far. The men then continued the drinking and talking. Ogbufi Idigo was talking about the palm wine tapper. Obiako, who suddenly gave up his trade. "Must be something behind it," he said, wiping the foam of wine from his mustache with the back of his left hand. "There must be a reason for it. A toad does not run in the daytime for nothing. Some people say the oracle warned him that he would fall off a palm tree and kill himself," said Akukari. Obiako has always been a strange one," said Nwakibi. "I've heard that many years ago. When his father had not been dead very long, he had gone to consult the oracle. The oracle said to him, your dead father wants you to sacrifice a goat to him. You know what he told the oracle? He said, 'Ask my dead father if he ever had a fowl when he was alive.'" Everybody laughed heartily except Okonkwo, who laughed uneasily because, as the saying goes, an old woman is always uneasy when dry bones are mentioned in a proverb. Okonkwo remembered his own father. At what? An old woman is... This means that one should never feel easy about the recently deceased being discussed about. What is not kill? Okay. Wait, is that chapter 3 or what? Fudge. God, how far am I in this? Oh, I'm not that. It's not that bad. Oh, chapter 5. That's not looking too good, Chief. Plus chapter 4 too. Woo! Not gonna be fun. She walked up to her husband. Well, that's not where I'm at. She said, there it is. At last, the young man who was pouring out the wine held up half a horn of the thick, white dregs and said, "What we are eating is finished. We have seen it." The others replied, "Who will drink the dregs?" he asked. "Whoever has a job in hand," said Idigo, looking at Nwakibi's elder son, Iguelo, a malicious twinkle in his eye. Wait, what? At last, the young man who was pouring out the wine held up half a horn of the thick, white dregs and said, "What we are eating is finished. We have seen it." The others replied, "Who will drink the dregs?" he asked. "Whoever has a job in hand," said Idigo, looking at Nwakibi's elder son, Iguelo, with a malicious twinkle in his eye. Everybody agreed that Iguelo should drink the dregs. He accepted the half-full horn from his brother and drank it. As Idigo had said, Igualo had a job in hand because he had married his first wife a month or two before. The thick dregs of palm wine were supposed to be good for men who were going into their wives. Wait a minute. After the wine had been drunk, Okonkwo laid his difficulties before Nwakiri. I have come to you for help, he said. Perhaps you can already guess what it is. I have cleared a farm but have no yams to sow. I know what it is to ask a man to trust another with his yams, especially these days when young men are afraid of hard work. I am not afraid of work. The lizard that jumped from the high Iroko tree to the ground said he would praise himself if no one else did. I began to fend for myself at an age when most people still suck at their mother's breasts. If you give me some yam seeds, I shall not fail you. Nakibi cleared his throat. It pleased me to see a young man like you these days when our youth has gone so soft. Many young men have come to me to ask for yams, but I have refused because I knew they would just dump them in the earth and leave them to be choked by weeds. When I say no to them, they think I am hard-hearted. It is not so. Eneke, the bird, says that since men have learned to shoot without missing, he has learned to fly without perching. I have learned to be stingy with my yams, but I can trust you. I know it as I look at you. As our fathers said, you can tell a red corn by its look. I shall give you twice 400 yams. Go ahead and prepare your farm. Okonkwo thanked him again and again and went home feeling happy. He knew that Nwakibi would not refuse him, but he had not expected he would be so generous. He had not hoped to get more than 400 seeds. He would now have to make a bigger farm. He hoped to get another 400 yams from one of his father's friends at Isuzo. Sharecropping was a very slow way of building up a barn of one's own. After all the toil, one got a third of the harvest. But for a young man whose father had no yams, there was no other way. And what made it worse in Okonkwo's case was that he had to support his mother, two sisters, from his meager harvest. Supporting his mother also meant supporting his father. She could not be expected to cook and eat while her husband starved, and so at a very early age, when he was striving desperately to build a barn through sharecropping, Okonkwo was also fending for his father's house. It was like pouring grains of corn into a bag full of holes. His mother and sisters worked hard enough, but they grew women's crops like cocoa yams, beans, and cassava. Yam, the king of crops, is a man's crop.
Well, a lot of classification. Okonkwo resents this because taking care of his mother is like taking care of his father, no less. About the unearned success of the farmers from
The year that Okonkwo took 800 seed yams from Nwakibi was the worst year in living memory. Nothing happened at its proper time. It was either too early or too late. It seemed as if the world had gone mad. The first rains were late, and when they came, that was only a brief moment. The blazing sun returned more fierce than it had ever been known, and scorched all the green that had appeared with the rains. Earth burned like hot coals and roasted all the yams that had been sown. Like all good farmers, Okonkwo had begun to sow with the first rains. He had sown 400 seeds when the rains dried up and the heat returned. He watched the sky all day for signs of rain, clouds, and lay awake all night. In the morning he went back to his farm and saw the withering tendrils. He tried to protect them from the smoldering earth by making rings of thick sisal leaves around them. But by the end of the day, the sisal rings were burned dry and gray. He changed them every day and prayed that the rain might fall in the night. But the drought continued for 8 market weeks, and the yams were killed. Some farmers had not planted their yams yet. They were the lazy, easygoing ones who always put off clearing their farms as long as they could. This year they were the wise ones. They sympathized with their neighbors with much shaking of the head, but inwardly they were happy for what they took to be their own foresight. Okonkwo planted what was left of his... Actually, let me answer that question. I know I have several literature techniques used in this chapter. Actually, let me finish reading this chapter for you guys. Okonkwo planted what was left of his seed yams when the rains finally returned. He had one consolation: the yams he had sown before the drought were his own. The harvest of the previous year. He still had the 800 from Noakibi and the 400 from his father's friends, so he would make a fresh start. But the year had gone mad. Rain fell as it had never fallen before. For days and nights together it poured down in violent torrents and washed away the yam heaps. Trees were uprooted and the deep gorges appeared everywhere. And the rain became less violent, but it went from day to day without a pause. The spell of sunshine, which always came in the middle of the wet season, did not appear. The yams put on luxuriant green leaves, but every farmer knew that without the sunshine the tubers would not grow. That year the harvest was sad like a funeral, and many farmers wept as they dug up the miserable and rotting yams. One man tied his cloth to a tree branch and hung himself. Whew! Okonkwo remembered that tragic year with a cold shiver throughout the rest of his life. It always surprised him, when he thought of it later, that he did not sink under the load of despair. He knew that he was a fierce fighter, but that year had been enough to break the heart of a lion. Since I survived that year, he always said, I shall survive anything. He put it down to his inflexible will. His father, Inoka, who was then an ailing man, had said to him during that terrible harvest year, do not despair. I know you will not despair. You have a manly and a proud heart. A proud heart can survive a general failure, because such a failure does not prick its pride. It is more difficult and more bitter when a man fails alone. Inoka was like that in his last days. His love of talk had grown with age and sickness. It tried Okonkwo's patience beyond words. I would too. Hold on. Chapter 4. God. 10 left. 10 left. Actually, 9 left, to be honest, but you know. Including 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 9. No. I'm gonna publish this one. 1 through 3.